David, not really. I mean, we were talking about this before, Jack and I outside. We were saying like, oh, that's not really David's scene. But then you kind of invented this whole thing with you and Chisora, didn't you?
Yeah, I've always had always looked for the angles to get the most amount of traction. And I remember me and Chisora, we boxed with the Luxembourg Boxing Federation, because the British Boxing Board of Control gave Derek Chisora his license back. I didn't have a license at that time, so Frank Warren got a license from Luxembourg, and we put on an event, and we had the cage between us at the weigh-in and the press conference, which I know the British Boxing Board of Control would never allow, but because it was of another federation, we could do what we wanted, and we made the most of it, and it was a great night, and everyone was happy at the end of it.
Could have used the cage in this press conference.
You could have definitely used the cage, especially with that chick. That
little kimchi.
Yeah, goddamn, yeah, she definitely needed the cage between them. She was chucking fish, drinks were going everywhere. Yeah, it's quite entertaining. It's like kind of a Jerry Springer vibe going on.
What is your opinion on this sort of new way we're seeing here? Because it's very rare we get like a boxing legend like yourself at these events. So it's interesting to get your opinion, because you said there also you understood the side of how to sell a fight as well. But you're a world-class amateur, so you've been through that side of the sport where it's very like, professional. You can't have any of that stuff, and this really is grassroots boxing to some of the guys. So, you've seen it all and understood all sides of boxing. What is your opinion on this sort of new wave?
I think that the best way to sum it up is, all the years I've been involved in boxing, and all the shows I've been to, the only two shows that all three of my kids have said they wanted to go to was the KSI fight. That's the only time they've ever said they wanted to go to boxing. They've never been interested in boxing until Misfits started putting on these shows. So I think it's connecting with the next generation of kids who have spent a lot of time on their iPads, scrolling through YouTube. They've got their people that they follow, and now they're doing boxing, so now they're interested in boxing. And maybe you should come to the boxing, enjoy the boxing, and then watch a Tank fight or Haney fight. You never know, but it definitely is good for boxing. Getting kids, maybe it might not be professional boxing or amateur boxing, but it's boxing of some description. And the guys train as hard as any professional boxers train. Watching KSI, his previews that I've seen, he trains probably harder than a lot of professionals. Same thing with Joe. Joe's trained for this fight like he would have done if he was fighting for a world title fight. And we're going to see the fruits of that on Saturday night.
Sure, but and you've also promoted fights as well. So for this to be like a mainstay, to actually have longevity and not just be like a fad, what do they need to do, or what do they need to carry on doing to make sure that it's not just face?
Just keep doing what they're doing, putting on fights that people care about. You go to a lot of big shows, and there's no one in the audience until the co-main event. No one cares. But these fights, you go there at 7 o'clock, the place is packed. People go there to see, good competitive fights. So it's very, very rare that you get like complete mismatches. They're kind of matched quite fairly. You saw the intensity between the girls earlier. One put a bucket of piss over someone else. It was, I don't know what the hell was going on. I was like, it's like, I'd like to see a fight after strength of that encounter. I'm sitting there thinking, this chick's crazy. I want to see the fight. I want to find. I definitely want to be there, keeping an eye on it, because it stimulates your interest.
There's been around this kind of thing. I mean, it's obviously fresh. You obviously do punditry for a lot of big fights as well. But does this kind of thing make you miss boxing, like the whole the show of it, and then like the building up to a pay-per-view when you're in and around this?
No, not really. But I'm kind of in and around it in one way or another. Anyway, I'm over working on the broadcast, so I'm in it a bit anyway. But yeah, I don't miss physically being there on stage, giving someone some hype. It's nice to be on the safe side of it for a change.
Because when you fought Joe back in September 2021, you were kind of toying with the idea well, if Tyson Fury was interested, maybe I would come back.
So I started training. I was in training. I was enjoying it. I was feeling good. Stuff that I couldn't do when I was in for instance, the belly fights, I was able to do now. So I was feeling better, and I was like, fuck it, if I'm going to do it, if I've got in shape, I'll just go and do it. If he would have said okay, I would have probably done a training camp and fought him. But since then, I'm in fact, I might do it.
I mean, mentally, I suppose when you're a fighter, you kind of have to always think I would beat anyone in the world. But at that time, how serious were you about believing?
I believe in myself. The only way you achieve anything in life is by believing it. It's like when I was 6-year-old child saying, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. Sounds unrealistic if a little kid tells you that, but to me it wasn't, and that's how I've manifested most of the stuff in my life, the titles I've won.
So you thought in September 2021 I would beat Tyson Fury?
Yeah. After the fight with Joe, how I felt comfortable, I felt not my old self again. Yeah, so if that fight was available, I would have taken it, but it wasn't, so it didn't. I'm kind of glad it didn't, because I've been able to do some other stuff and relax, and it would have been I would have needed to do something very, very spectacular that I'm very unsure with this whole body. But in my mind can, but I'm not sure if the brain connection with the body works as quick as it once did.
And it's kind of fitting that Joe was technically your last opponent. How good is he and how hard does he hit, for those who might not have seen him?
He punches hard enough to knock 9 people out in a row. It's not easy to knock somebody out in a professional sport. And he's like a solid light heavyweight. He comes down from cruiserweight, comes down from heavyweight. He walks around at 210 pounds, about 15 stone, and he's got the physical advantages in terms of size and the arm length. He doesn't have the advantage in terms of speed and agility and youth. So if this was like a CrossFit challenge, I'd say KSI would win. But because it's boxing, and boxing is very skill-based, very reaction-based, very rhythm-based, and you only get that from time and time again doing boxing, competitive fights and competitive sparring rounds. I'd say Joe's got a significant advantage on that side, but where does the skills and the physicalness match up? At some stage, everyone gets old enough where things slow down, but is he at that stage yet? And is KSI's boxing ability caught up? We find out on Saturday.
Yeah, and what would you like to, let's say he wins and it all goes to plan, would you like to see him carry on fighting? Because there's kind of like an endless talent or pool of people you can fight. You know yourself at 40 and you've got money, it's kind of not easy to get going.
I'd like to see, if victory has succeeded, I'd like to see the Jake Paul fight. I think that one is should be an easy one to make. And Joe did his podcast the other day, and Jake said, after you beat KSI, we'll do it. So they've got kind of a verbal agreement already. Joe?
Yeah.
That's right, yeah?
What?
Jake Paul said after you beat KSI.
It was on his podcast live, and then I'm recording, and then he said it again to me privately. He said you beat him later on it.
Yeah, so that's the next stage. But he's got a young lad to deal with first. It's going to be interesting.
Speaking of the heavyweight scene opponent, I know the last time you were at one of these at KSI and Joe's first press conference, you were talking about how he felt AJ probably needed one more. Do you think it looks like now in December he's not going to do that one more? He's going to fight.
Yeah, I'd like to see him fight Dillian Whyte. I think that's the perfect opponent. It's an all-British fight. You can do it at the O2 Arena, and it's just.
But it looks like he's doing Wilder in December.
Great, but have a fight Dillian beforehand. If you can't beat Dillian, you should be getting in there with Wilder. The victory in his last fight against Franklin wasn't ample preparation to fight Wilder. Trust me, it's a whole different sport. What he did in that fight versus what he's going to need to do to beat Wilder, he needs to get in the ring with someone who really lets his hands go, like Dillian. And if he's able to deal with it, then okay, he's going to give himself a better opportunity against Wilder. Or don't fight anyone and going against Wilder, ill-prepared, and he's going to need to be prepared because it's been a while since he's got busy and literally let his hands go. You've probably got to go back to the Andy Ruiz first fight where he was actually letting his hands go. But since then, he hasn't put any shots together. 24 rounds with Usyk, he didn't. 12 rounds with Ruiz the second time, he didn't. Franklin, he didn't. It's a long time, a few years since he's actually let his hands go. So he's going to need to fight someone, let his hands go, and beat somebody. Then it will give him the true confidence going against Wilder. Because just saying I think I can beat Wilder because I think I can, doesn't really mean anything.
Thank you for your time, David. By the way, do you wish they had Saudi money back in your fight?
I really do. I definitely do. Who doesn't want to get paid 10 times what they got paid?
Cheers, mate.